Hej och välkomna till Ntd Nyheter. Jag heter Cecilia Samuelsson. Här är våra rubriker. Den tidigare polischefen vid Kapitolium om misslyckandena under 6 januari. Soros stiftelse varnar för seger för Trump 2024. Regeringar för krig mot jordbrukare världen över enligt en ny dokumentär. Förkrossade familjer i Kinas ofärdiga hem. Råd till par, så får ni ordning på ekonomin. De påstådda säkerhetsbristerna i samband med händelserna den 6 januari var föremål för debatt på Capitol den 19 september. Här kommer mer om vittnesmålet från Kapitoliums tidigare polischef Steven Sund.
Kongressledamot Barry Loudermilk inledde med att kritisera demokraterna i representanthuset. Han säger att de spenderade miljoner på att utreda intrånget i Kapitolium, men misslyckades med att utreda vad han kallade de verkliga säkerhetsbristerna.
The Democrat Select Committee never invited Chief Sund to testify during one of their primetime hearings, despite him being the chief of police on January 6th. Perhaps that is because his testimony didn't fit with their preconceived narrative.
Loudermilk kritiserade också demokraterna för att ha stött den så kallade Defund the Police-rörelsen under månaderna som ledde fram till intrånget. Steven Sund, tidigare polischef i Kapitolium, säger att man misslyckades med att sammanställa olika fakta den 6 januari, precis som vid 11 september.
We now know that significant intelligence existed that individuals were plotting to storm the Capitol building, target lawmakers, and discussing shooting my officers. And yet no intel agencies or units sounded the alarm.
Sund säger att om FBI och USAs departement för inrikes säkerhet, DHS, hade följt sina policies och etablerade metoder skulle händelserna inte ha blivit som de blev.
We were blindsided. Intelligence failed operations. The January 6 attack at the Capitol was preventable.
Den före detta polischefen säger att han hela tiden stötte på hinder när han bad om hjälp från nationalgardet.
I then had to beg the Pentagon officials to send us help. I was repeatedly denied assistance by the Army Lieutenant General Pyatt, citing concerns over optics of the National Guard on Capitol Hill. The DC National Guard, many of whom were standing within eyesight of the Capitol, and whose motto is Capitol Guardians, would not arrive until almost 6 p.m. After the fighting was over and the Capitol grounds secured. The New Jersey State Police arrived before they did.
Kongressledamot Norma Torres kritiserade republikanerna för vad hon kallade ett direkt försök att skriva om händelserna den dagen. Torres pickade ut kommentarer som hon säger gjordes av den tidigare presidenten Trump, som påstås ha kallat den 6 januari för en vacker dag, och att J6-anklagade var fantastiska patrioter med kärlek i sina hjärtan.
Do you agree, Mr. Sund, with the former president that it was a beautiful day on January 6th and that those people that attacked your officers had love in their heart?
It was not a beautiful day, ma'am.
And did they have love in their heart while they were attacking your officers, sir?
I don't know what they had in their heart.
Sund håller med om att många agerade brottsligt den 6 januari och att de som bröt mot lagen förtjänar att ställas till svars.
Soros Foundation är orolig för att den tidigare presidenten Donald Trump kan vinna presidentvalet 2024. Trump skulle enligt uppgift skada den europeiska enigheten och de framsteg som gjorts i Ukraina-kriget.
George Soros grundade Open Society Foundations, OSF, som nu leds av hans 37-årige son Alex Soros. I samband med rykten om att familjen Soros skulle lämna Europa publicerade Alex Soros en debattartikel i Politico med rubriken "Ingen Soros-reträtt från Europa". I den förutspår han att USAs tidigare president Donald Trump, eller åtminstone någon med hans isolationistiska och antieuropeiska politik, kommer att bli republikanernas kandidat. Alex Soros säger att han anpassar OSF för att kunna svara på vilket politiskt scenario som helst efter att dammet lagt sig efter nästa års presidentval. Soros fruktar att Trump eller någon annan republikansk MAGA-seger 2024 kommer att citat äventyra den europeiska enigheten och underminera de framsteg som gjorts på så många fronter som svar på kriget i Ukraina. Han gick inte närmare in på hur en Trump-seger skulle äventyra den europeiska enigheten eller leda till oönskade resultat när det gäller Ukraina. Trump har tidigare sagt till Fox News att han skulle verka för ett fredsavtal mellan Ryssland och Ukraina.
No more. You got to make a deal. I would tell Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're going to give him a lot. We're going to give him more than they ever got if we have to. I will have the deal done in one day.
I början av augusti visade en CNN-undersökning att stödet för Ukraina har minskat. Över 50% av amerikanerna anser att USA har hjälpt tillräckligt.
Regeringar för krig mot jordbrukare världen över enligt en ny dokumentär. Roman Balmakov, regissör för filmen No Farmers No Food, berättar för Ntd om detta djärva påstående.
Thank you for joining us.
Chris, thank you for having me.
Roman, in this documentary, you're saying there's a global war on farmers. Tell us about this war.
Well, it's kind of an interesting under the surface war because, you know, you look out at vast farmland across America or Europe and you think, wow, that's pristine, that's very beautiful, it's very idyllic. But underneath the surface, governments around the world have been putting these very onerous regulations on farmers, which have been handcuffing them, all in the name of saving the planet. You know, these green policies, they sound very good on paper. And when you hear about them on the media, they sound like they're the panacea to solve all of the world's problems. But in practice, they're having the effect of just handcuffing farmers. And in the instance of European farmers, they're kicking a large swath of them off the land. In Asia, they're making them essentially not be able to farm their land because they haven't been able to use fertilizer. And here in America, they're using various regulations that are on the books to slowly take more and more land from American farmers and ranchers. So it's that type of a war. It's like you can say it's sort of a cold war on farmers.
Now, in the making of this film, you were on the ground talking with actual farmers. Can you share any stories of individual farmers that you heard while making this film?
Yeah, one of the countries we first went to was the Netherlands because they were sort of the poster child for this farmer protest movement. And we drove around the country and there's so many farmers who are feeling the effects of these policies that we literally just stopped at random farms that we came across, and almost all of them had stories to tell. This one farm was a 6th-generation farm, and they would have to curtail 95% of their dairy cows in order to meet the government standards. So if you think about it, if you have a large dairy farm operation and you have to get rid of 95% of your cows, for them that would be the equivalent of being left with 6 cows. And so, I mean, there's no business to be had there. That was when they told me that, and then they showed me their cows. I was just shocked. And then they showed me why, because there was a small shrub, maybe a mile up from their farm, up on a hill, that the government needs to protect because they signed an agreement with the European Union 30 years ago saying the shrub needs to remain here. And apparently the nitrogen from the cows is deposited on the shrub for not allowing it to grow as well as it should. Whether that's actually the case or not is dubious, according to the scientists we spoke with. But that was just brutal because, I mean, they would have to pack up and just move, right? After 6 generations of farming on this land, it's brutal. And similar stories here in the U.S. as well.
Now, Roman, the subtitle of your documentary is Will You Eat the Bugs? I personally will not be eating any bugs, but why did you choose that subtitle?
Christopher, you think you're not going to be eating bugs. You think that right now. Someday you'll be looking at this clip thinking, man, was I mistaken when you're going to the store and meat is, the hamburger patty is $47 a pound, but the bugs, they're only $7 per pound. And so you're sort of forced to eat the bugs. The bug aspect of it was interesting, and it's not something I actually anticipated going into this project. When we were driving around, again, the Netherlands, we came across some farmers which were alluding to insect farm operations sprouting up. And they were saying that some of the farmers, because they were getting kicked off of their cattle ranches and dairy productions, they were moving into insect farming. And so we wound up calling a ton of these production sites. Very few of them actually were willing to talk to us. Even fewer were willing to actually show us their operations. One of the people was willing to show us their operations. But that's sort of the move, where it's like, in order to save the planet, the idea is that agriculture, traditional agriculture, creates too many greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, we have to curtail the farmers, shrink that sector. But what are people going to eat? Where's the protein going to come from for human civilization? Well, here come the rise of the insect farms. And it's happening. There's a large insect farm that's being built right now in America. It's going to go online in 2025. There's a huge one that was built recently in France. Recently, insects were approved by the European Health Commission as a safe food. And so the regulations are being opened up. And in the future, it really might be the case, if we keep going down this road, that meat will be a luxury item and insects will be the main source of protein.
What are you hoping audiences take away from watching your documentary? I
think my biggest takeaway for people is, well, twofold. One is I like to equip people with the facts and the knowledge and a language that they can use when they're speaking with people who are pushing forward these policies, which sound beautiful and they sound great on paper. But when you look underneath the hood, it's not so great. The second thing is that, if you go back into the 1950s and you look at the Great Leap Forward over in China, the Great Leap Forward sounded like the best idea possible. We're going to launch China into, the frontier of steel production. We're going to become an industrial powerhouse. We're going to leapfrog over the other countries which have had a head start on us. But now, when we look back in hindsight, the Great Leap Forward is synonymous with a famine that killed somewhere between 30 to 50 million people. And so right now, what I fear is that we're in the middle of a green leap forward. I really want to avoid a situation where 100 years from now, we'll look back to this period and to the UN's Agenda 2030 and say, man, that was a rough famine that killed 1 billion people. But that we only know that in hindsight. So I'd like to just equip people with the facts to avoid a possible disaster.
All right, Roman Baumakov, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Att lägga sitt livs besparingar på drömmen om att äga ett hem för att sedan stå där med ett tomt skal utan vatten, värme och elektricitet. Det är vad som händer många i Kina i samband med landets allt djupare fastighetskris.
Dessa kinesiska bostadsköpare har sett sina drömmar om att äga en egen bostad krossade. De skanderar: vi vill ha tillbaka vårt hus. Och de håller kontrakt i sina händer för lägenheter i ett oavslutat bostadsområde i den nordvästra staden Tongchuan. Xi Qianyu är byggnadsarbetare. Han köpte en lägenhet på förhand för 450 000 kronor utan att veta att den 8 år senare fortfarande skulle vara oavslutad. Kvarteret marknadsfördes som ett högklassigt komplex med service på vd-nivå. Men nu går Xi varje natt upp för 20 trappor för att sova i ett rum utan vatten, värme och elektricitet.
I don't have any choice now. Living here, there's no water or electricity. When I come back from work at night and climb up the stairs to the 20th floor, I have to use a flashlight. For lighting, as you can see, I use a solar-powered lamp. It's set to automatic, so it turns on at night and off during the day. I virtually don't drink water or wash my face up here. I can even say I don't brush my teeth. From May until now, I've worked on the construction site during the day and come up here to sleep at night.
Xi och ett dussin andra bor i kvarteret för att sätta press på myndigheterna att ta itu med så kallade ofärdiga eller oavslutade bostäder. Sådana byggnader har blivit allt vanligare under Kinas flera år långa fastighetsnedgång, där många byggherrar har gått i konkurs eller kämpat med sina skulder. Enligt invånarna har byggandet stått stilla sedan 2015, men lägenheterna har sålts fram till 2020. Många av hans grannar är pensionärer som har köpt lägenheter till sina ogifta söner eller arbetare som inte har råd att hyra någon annanstans. Inomhus lyser solcellsdrivna lampor upp kala betongväggar och golv som är täckta av damm och grus. De boende lagar mat i ett gemensamt kök på första våningen med en enda gasolbrännare. De delar också på de gemensamma toaletterna i ett provisoriskt plåtskjul. Den 73-årige köparen kallade upplevelsen hjärtskärande, grym och ofattbar. Och den här före detta kolgruvarbetaren betalade 400 000 kronor för en lägenhet för 5 år sedan.
We've been busy our entire lives. The developer asked us to gather money, but we don't have a stable source of income. We work as security guards and take odd jobs to make ends meet.
Enligt flera bostadskontrakt som Reuters tagit del av så har namnen på byggherren och projektet ändrats flera gånger. Köpare hävdar att Tongchuan-tjänstemän för 3 år sedan sa att en kommitté inrättats för att lösa frågan, men byggandet återupptogs inte. Byggherren kunde inte kontaktas för en kommentar.
När det gäller den globala ekonomin uttrycker analytiker oro över fortsatta tecken på en ekonomisk avmattning i Kina. För att hjälpa oss förstå vad som orsakar detta och hur det påverkar resten av världen inklusive USA talade Ntd med chefsekonomen på Tressis.
Daniel Akaye, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much.
So Daniel, China's exports have dropped again, this time by 8.8% in August. This is continuing a trend since April. What is driving this trend?
I think that what drives this trend is the very significant slowdown of the global economy and particularly the Eurozone. We have to remember that China is a very large exporter to countries like Germany, which is in recession, countries that are in the developed nations suffering from a weaker environment for manufacturing. Obviously, China certainly provides a significant amount of the imports for those countries in the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector in developed nations is in contraction for what is now more than 10 months.
And given that China is the world's second largest economy, how do their economic woes impact, say, America?
Well, certainly the challenges of the Chinese economy impact the United States in 2 ways. On the one hand, the Chinese imports into the United States, i.e. the Chinese exports to the United States, are going to be probably cheaper. We're going to see some deflation in imports into the United States. The second, obviously, is that nobody benefits from the slowdown of any of the large economies. So we already know that when the United States enters into a recession, there is a fear of recession in many other economies we are all interconnected. So obviously, a slowdown in the Chinese economy, although it is expected to grow about 5% this year, is certainly going to impact Asia and certainly Latin America very significantly, and obviously the United States to a lesser extent.
And Daniel, new projections by Bloomberg Economics says China's economy may never overtake the U.S. That's after previous research had said China's economy might surpass the U.S. as soon as 2028. What changed here?
I think that ultimately what changed was the estimates of growth coming from the real estate and construction sector. Massive infrastructure spending. I think that is what was probably mistaken in some of consensus estimates, the idea that the Chinese economy would completely offset the manufacturing and construction part of the economy with the service economy to generate no discernible impact on annual growth. So obviously it sheds between 2 to 2.5 points per annum of growth, and that leads to the revision that Bloomberg was estimating.
And what about on the U.S. economy's side? Has it gained any strength, or is it still the same?
Well, at the same time, that's a very good point. At the same time, the U.S. economy was predicted to enter into a recession this year. It is very likely that it will not happen. The U.S. economy seems to be a lot stronger and is probably going to deliver in the third quarter a level of growth that is much larger than what estimates were already included in consensus. However, We don't know if there will be a recession in 2024, but at least so far, what everyone can say is that the doom and gloom predictions about a huge recession in the United States in 2023 is not happening, and that maybe the estimates for 2023 will continue to put the United States significantly above the Eurozone, which is a very important part, because if you remember a few years ago in the middle of the pandemic, most of consensus estimates assumed that the Eurozone would get out and faster and better of the crisis than the United States because of the enormous stimulus packages that they implemented and the furlough job plans, etc. It was the opposite. So the United States is surprising to the upside. China is surprising on the negative side because of this contraction in real estate and exports. And in the middle, the Eurozone is not surprising almost anyone because the Eurozone is not growing at all.
Wow, indeed. And Daniel Lacalle, thank you so much for your time.
En kinesisk topptjänsteman avsattes från sin post som utrikesminister och är nu föremål för en nationell säkerhetsutredning. Vad var det som utlöste det hela? En utomäktenskaplig affär under hans tid som ambassadör i Washington.
En utomäktenskaplig affär är nu en nationell säkerhetsutredning. Den fokuserar på den tidigare kinesiska ministern Qin Gang. Från juli 2021 till januari i år arbetade han som Kinas högsta sändebud i USA. Och enligt Wall Street Journal hade han en affär under den tiden. Nu vill Peking veta om han avslöjade Kinas nationella säkerhetshemligheter i processen. Höga kinesiska tjänstemän informerades om händelsen. Källor uppgav för Wall Street Journal att affären hade lett till att ett barn fötts i USA. Qin Gang avsattes från sin utrikesministerpost i juli efter bara ett halvår på posten. Beslutet följde på ett månadslångt försvinnande från offentligheten. Experter menar att detta vanligtvis signalerar att en intern utredning pågår inom det kinesiska kommunistpartiet.
It means that he's cleaning house. She is very concerned with loyalty, and anybody who gives any measure or inkling that they could be a threat, he'll target them and remove them. So we're seeing this model over and over again.
Den erfarne diplomaten Wang Yi ersatte Qin som utrikesminister. Kinas utrikesministerium har fortfarande inte svarat på begäran om kommentar.
Nu till Europa som uppmanar Kina att pressa Ryssland att avsluta kriget.
Europeiska rådets ordförande uppmanar den 20 september Kina att hjälpa till att få slut på konflikten. Den brittiske utrikesministern James Cleverly uppmanade sin kinesiska kollega att göra detsamma.
And I hope that he will impress upon Russia the complete inappropriateness of their action, and I hope that China will call for Russia to withdraw.
Cleverly gjorde uttalandet på tisdagen efter att Kinas utrikesminister Wang Yi hade anlänt för ett besök i Ryssland. Kina och Ryssland tillkännagav ett partnerskap utan gränser strax innan Ryssland invaderade Ukraina i februari 2022. Peking säger att alla länders suveränitet och territoriella integritet måste respekteras. Kina avstod dock från att rösta i alla FN-omröstningar som krävde att Moskva skulle dra tillbaka sina trupper från Ukraina.
Och i Spanien, där Spaniens damlandslag i fotboll kommer nu helt enkelt kalla sig för Spaniens fotbollslandslag, vilket är samma namn som herrlandslaget har.
Ändringen gjordes av det spanska fotbollsförbundet. Det sker efter att den nu före detta förbundspresidenten kysste en av spelarna på läpparna under lagets firande av VM-guldet förra månaden. Interimspresident Pedro Rocha sa citat: "Vi vill att detta ska representera en konceptuell förändring och ett erkännande av att fotboll är fotboll oavsett vem som spelar den." Det finns ännu inga uppgifter om hur folk kommer att skilja de två lagen åt.
När par inte får ordning på sin ekonomi kan det få negativa konsekvenser, allt från stress till skuldsättning och skilsmässa. Ntd bad några finansiella planerare om råd.
Dålig ekonomisk planering mellan makar kan leda till skuldsättning, försämrad kreditvärdighet, ekonomisk otrohet, oförmåga att ta höjd för nödsituationer, intäktsbortfall vid pension, påverkan på barn, juridiska problem, psykisk ohälsa, påfrestningar på förhållandet, begränsat ekonomiskt oberoende och slutligen skilsmässa.
The ones that we see just right off the bat is just the stress, debt problems spill over to, accumulation problems, to saving problems, and then, cash flow problems. And before you know it, it really starts to create a real strain and stress on the marriage.
Brian Cannon är vd för Cannon Advisors och författare till boken Retirement Unplanned. Han säger att det är viktigt för makar att komma samman för att planera saker som en enhet snarare än som individer. Detta innebär att skapa en budget, en skuldstrategi, en semesterplan och en nödfond och göra det tillsammans och i slutändan använda samma bankkonto.
We have a lot of clients that come that have been married for 40 years that still operate independently. But I think, there's a higher level of success when you're able to merge.
Cannon och hans fru började själva med separata bankkonton. Men han säger att man har en bättre känsla för hur ekonomin ser ut när det bara finns ett. En viktig del av detta är förtroende som byggs upp över tid och det bör finnas en kommunikation mellan varandra. En viktig del av detta är tillit som byggs upp över tid. Och kommunikationen bör helst ske genom detta.
Talking, not texting, not on social media, actually sitting down and having a conversation. And quite frankly, the sooner they do that, the better they're going to be and stronger as a couple.
Larry Sprung är vd för Midland Financial och författare till boken Financial Planning Made Personal. Sprung säger att makar bör diskutera vad de vill individuellt och sedan hitta en gemensam grund.
If one of the spouses has a situation where they enjoy spending a lot of their discretionary income, right, versus the other spouse who may be more inclined to putting away the majority of their discretionary income for retirement, those two goals are not necessarily aligned. Now, one may not be right and one may not be wrong, right? But the whole idea is to have that conversation and maybe it's meeting in the middle.
Sprung betonar vikten av att ha dessa samtal. Han säger att de är nyckeln till att undvika en uppsjö av konsekvenser.
Tack att du har tittat och på återseende.